Welcome to the Conversations That Matter podcast. I am John Harris. We have on the end there Raul Drip, and then we got Gordon Sanchez.
Hello, folks.
Some of you recognize them from some of their videos. Actually, real quick, before we get started, why don't you just plug your channels or wherever people can find you. What's yours YouTube channel?
It's called Itching Ears Productions, playing off of the 2 Timothy 4:3 verse, Paul's warning about, beware those who are looking to tickle your itching ears. And my cat has very itchy ears, and those two, that image and the verse kind of came together and sort of satirizing the evangelical industrial complex's compromise and how that continues. So,
well, it's funny. It's therapeutic, your material, for people who are frustrated and just wonder sometimes, hey, why don't these evangelical elites, why don't they get it? And so you do some very clever videos. And then Gordon, working.
Yeah, go to YouTube, type in Gordon Sanchez. There's only one of me.
That's probably one.
Twitter, Gordy4Justice. That's the number 4. Roman numeral IV, if you speak Roman.
And you'll never be touched in the purge because you're so woke. So
you're untouchable.
I'll probably instigate the purge.
Yes, I'm about to be canceled by you. So there's a few things we're going to cover. I don't know how in depth we'll get. We'll just see where the conversation takes us. But we're going to talk first about the project we're doing, just a little bit, why we're together, because you are probably wondering as you're watching this. And then we're going to talk a little bit just about, I saw two things that, one I saw on Twitter, one was sent to me this morning, but an article and then a Twitter status we can talk about kind of two big Eva types and what they're saying, and it's pretty, I think, representative of the narrative that's out there. And then we can talk a little bit about, and I don't know how long we'll have to develop this one, but I wanted to talk about news sources. So talk about where you get your news sources. I'll talk about what I read, what I trust, what my process is for figuring out whether something's authentic or not, whether I should listen to it, because that's something that we have talked about a little bit on the podcast, but I'm just finding out right now, and I'll give some scenarios of why I'm finding this out, but that some people are trusting sources that I would not necessarily see as credible. CNN being the top of the list, but there are others. So let's start though with the project. So we're in Chicago right now, and we all came from different places, and we're doing a project. And some of you know about Nini's Deli and that whole story of Juan Riesco and what happened to him and his church. And as we've been here, I'll speak for myself, I've been blown away with how just terrible the situation is, but also impressed with how resilient and faithful and brave the people at Juan's church and his family, and how they've been just as positive as can be, trusting the Lord through this situation. And there's so many details to this, but for those who don't know, the long and short of it is Juan took a stand for Christ, for Scripture, and ended up Black Lives Matter wanted to cancel him. We're finding out now that the church he went to, MPI Church, was already on the mayor's list because of they met about a month into the COVID lockdown. They decided to start meeting, so they were fined by the mayor. And so it's like 2020 in a story. You got COVID lockdowns, you got the Black Lives Matter narrative, and how that basically shut down Juan's restaurant. His family was threatened. The pastor was threatened. Their church was threatened. They had to skip town. It's a terrible story with how aggressive people were against him in the local community after he was kind of like number one. He was the big deli in Chicago. And then obviously the gospel is part of this narrative as well, because they're not defeated. He gave it all. He gave up everything to follow Christ, and it's because he's been radically changed. And so anyway, that's in a very short nutshell. Why don't you guys talk about what's hit you about just the story? What are you feeling right now?
I got to conduct a lot of the interviews yesterday. I would say, I knew a little bit about the story before we came, but for me, it's just been what I didn't expect. We were in Chicago when we were young for like a couple of days, I think, but I don't really know Chicago that well. Coming from the Northeast, the Northeast is kind of a spiritually, I usually say dark, especially if I'm in the South and I'm talking to people. If I have friends in the Bible Belt and I explain to them what things are like in the Northeast, I usually say, well, it's sort of a darkness you can feel, just because there's the Christian presence is not really as great. There's not as many biblically sound churches. Chicago is like that and then some. It's a very spiritually dark place. Maybe one of the most I've been to. So that was like immediately impressed, like shortly after landing, I feel like, in Chicago. So that makes the Christians here just shine that much brighter. And sort of what was impressed upon me, the whole thing has been just a massive personal challenge to me, because these Christians, most of them who have been persecuted above and beyond what I ever have, there's just there's no regret, it's like nothing but joy. They tell you how they've been persecuted with these giant smiles on their faces. And there's hard stuff, and like when the film comes out, you'll see that there's emotional. It was very, very tough, but when they're talking about actually getting persecuted, it's almost like, I don't know if you got this sense too, but it's almost like they're talking about this good time that they had. Like it's just like, oh yeah, I remember when this happened. Yeah, I remember when this happened. The story is insane. A couple of times we did about 7 interviews yesterday, and towards the end of the day when we were wrapping up, all of us have said it at one point or another. It's like peeling an onion. This story, every time you peel a layer, you find that there's another one there, and it's thicker than the one before. And I was filled with something between shock, rage, and just my mind being blown that no major, not just like Christian publication or Christian media outlet, but like no media outlet period has really found this story to be worth looking into. And it's like you said, it's 2020 in a story. This is one of the most important stories of 2020, I think, for the church. And we're the guys who are like telling it. We're just a couple of guys telling the story. So I feel immensely privileged to have been able to take part in it, but I think it's a massive shame that it's taken this long to tell it.
6+ months, yeah.
Yeah, and on that note, people who have been very generous, you've been very generous, many of you watching this or listening, we have in the info section, you can find our Give, Send, Go for funding this project. And we figured it would cost about, with all the travel expenses and rentals for cameras, and because we had to fly Juan and his brother up here, and we had to fly out, and food, and just everything, expenses of where to stay. It's editing, probably about $10,000 to do this right. And we've raised a lot. We've raised, last I checked, it was over 5. I'm not sure where it's at now. And I said at the beginning, I said, I'll cover this. Whatever we don't have, we're gonna do this. So if you're still interested in donating to that, I appreciate those who already have, and you're more than welcome. This is going to be a powerful story. And one of the things I kept thinking is that, in many parts of the country, Bible Belt areas especially, where there's a lot of evangelical churches, I could probably go into those churches and talk about this story without showing the images and interviews that you're going to see once we come out with this. And I think people would just kind of maybe look at me blankly. They just not even understand. There's still places where people legitimately think like this COVID lockdown it really is all about, it's a health thing. That's what's motivating this. They really do legitimately think Black Lives Matter is somehow concerned with racism. This story blows it all up. This story shows one of the most liberal cities in the country, with a church, there's not much of a Christian presence here, with this one church, how they stood against they're an outpost is what they are. They're an outpost in a sea of ungodliness, and they're standing against threats to the ability that they have to just worship God, just like most of us have been enjoying for years. And if you don't think it can't happen, you're going to find out when we show this story. Yeah, it can. And if you live in an area that's not Chicago, it's coming to you. These ideas that are taking hold here are going to be taking hold in other places. And so it's a warning, but there's also a lot of hope in the story. So, Andrew, what about you? What stood out to you about all of this?
Well, as you're mentioning that, I mean, what you alluded to, David, the joy that we saw in everyone who's been through this, and I mean, they went through scary stuff. I mean, their lives and property are being threatened, their livelihoods, their businesses, for some people, their families, wives and children. They're being doxxed, they're being followed around, harassed. Mobs gathering, protesting. I mean, they went through some things I've not gone through, really intimidating circumstances, and yet they speak about it with kind of a joy. And it's this bond that has between all of them in suffering for Christ that's brought them closer together, closer to the Lord. I think you sense that, and it's inspiring. You just you see how obviously in Shirley and all of them could mention how in the moment they were scared, taken by surprise, just rolling with it, trusting the Lord, but doing their best. But yeah, they speak about it almost with a certain fondness in how they've seen the Lord protect and bless them through it. That part of it's really
they've seen
inspiring.
people come back to church, and they've seen people. Their guy got saved, I guess, when they were street preaching to this mob trying to kill them. Well, some of them wanted to kill them, saying horrible things about them. Yeah. And they preached, and a guy even got saved. And we even got some interviews with people who came back to church because they heard about the story. So, yeah, pretty incredible.
One of the things that really stood out to me is the simplicity of the whole thing. It's real persecution. It's the kind of persecution you read about in I guess dystopian books, but also in like Gulag Archipelago, and like some of the beginning stuff that happens in a culture when.
Sorry,
I'm gonna go all Jordan Peterson.
You say Gulag
Archipelago. Sorry. When this stuff really starts to happen in a society, and when Christians are specifically targeted, but the simplicity is just that it's just what you're telling me to do, I can't do because of what I believe. I hold to what the Bible teaches, and that's not what the Bible teaches. So no, I can't say it. I can't take a knee. I can't raise a fist. I can't do any of this stuff because my conscience won't allow me to, and that's all there is to it. But I want you to know that Jesus can save you, and that's it. Like, that's the whole thing. I mean, that in a way, that's this entire story.
He just wasn't willing to support the organization BLM, and because of that, it was funny. One of the things they said, I should probably not give away too many details, because we're going to come out with this fantastic documentary. But just one more little thing. They said that they tried at one point. They said, okay, like Black Lives Matter, okay? We believe that Black lives do matter, but we don't agree with the movement. And that, like, they thought that would sort of like pacify the protesters, and it made them more bold. Now they're saying now say Black trans lives matter, and so like and just the sheer insanity. They had like someone from Moody Bible or who went to Moody out there, a student there, like flipping them off. They had. The family had to leave in the middle of the night for fear of their lives because of all the death threats. But one of the guys there who was black, who was street preaching, he had a white guy come by and call him a racial slur. Like, talk about like upside down world. Like, it just like that. Say something a white supremacist would say in the name of opposing white supremacy. It makes no sense. And we're living in a time when good is evil, evil's good. People think up is down, down is up, and his story just makes that more evident. But again, gives the hope at the end. It really, these guys are resilient, they're brave, and that's why we were attracted to this, because it's not just a dismal, like, oh, things are getting bad. It's like, yeah, there's some bad things, but also, and it's a warning, but there's hope. And the church is still there. The pastor had left, and he came back, and they're going strong, and they're defying the culture that's around them, but they're doing it in love. They're doing it the way a Christian should do it. So, any points, you guys, things that hit you, points you want to bring up?
You mentioned, the church is open. We were just there this morning, and I was really rejuvenated by being able to go in to worship the Lord and not have to wear a mask over my face, not to have to be suffocating under a piece of cloth that's useless, other than, if I were infected with COVID, it's probably just recycling it back into my lungs again and again, so I become symptomatic if I'm not yet. It was nice to not have to go through that charade, and they're open, they're doing, someone might have been wearing a mask there, but it was just...
I saw one guy and it was over his chin.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, so the narrative that's being perpetuated on us in the world, exaggerations of things, and just the thing that we're supposed to be thinking about, which is COVID-19. It's just not, these people it was just like a throwback to, wow, a church service where there's not even the least bit reminder of that distraction.
It was 2019 church service, right?
It was a 2019 church service, and I know they've taken a lot of heat for that. And they've been protested and they've been threatened, but wow, they're open, and they are again, just a lot of joy exuding from that church. So it was really great to be there, and for me, as in the corporate video work that I do, as I've mentioned to you guys before, I'm usually, if there's a moral framework for something these days, more and more it has to be social justice-y, and it's just kind of makes you want to gag. So it's really nice to see like a real story of what's really going on. And I've never been to Chicago before, so sort of hearing firsthand what these folks actually think and what they've gone through, and it's just not what you get in the mainstream media by a truckload, a train load, by a mile, by a country mile. I'm trying to find like...
You're trying to find the southern...
I'm losing it, so...
Yes, like a southern colloquialism.
By a kilometer in the Shire.
So one of the things I just thought of too, when we were at the church and I gave my little, like a pastor had me come up and I read a passage of scripture, and I said to them though, like, one of the things that we're doing with this documentary is we're going to show the hypocrisy of BLM. And now this is a church that is mainly Hispanic. There's black people, there's a few white people, but like mainly minorities. And they cheered basically. They were clapping. And then I said, and I got a little bold about it. I said, and we're also going to show the hypocrisy of the COVID Nazis. And
they were loud.
Standing ovation, yeah.
Yeah, they were just like, and I was surprised at how well. The reason I think I was surprised is in most of the churches that I would probably be familiar with, I would get kickback for that.
Oh yeah.
If I had said that in probably most churches, even in the Bible Belt, and said like, been that bold about these issues, I would have probably been talked to afterward by someone who told me like, oh, hey, why are you being too political? Why, is that really necessary? Is that but here's the thing. These guys are living in, they see firsthand the effects of these policies because they're getting the brunt of it in Chicago. They're seeing where this leads, and they see right through it. And they're not like a bunch of what's the word, Christian white nationalists or anything like.
I think not.
No, they're just
But they're
regular
Trump voters.
There probably are a lot of them.
Well, they are. Everyone that we talked to pretty much across the board, that I did across the board, they see the connection of, I had a conversation towards the end of the day with a guy, and it was like, no, it's not that we don't support Trump because he's our savior. It's just that we know that, like, once he's out of the way, we know that we're on the...
Right.
All the attention goes to us. But it had nothing to do with Christian nationalism.
Yeah, no one. It's obvious that no one in there, like... So actually, that's a good transition here. Why don't I do this? So we'll switch gears here to something. So I saw this on Twitter this morning. It's David French tweets, but he retweeted a video that I had seen, and it's a guy, kind of middle-aged guy, who he went into the Capitol. And for those who haven't seen my videos, I've done a few now, 3 that I've addressed this issue, because I was actually in DC, and I was not inside the Capitol or anything, but I've gone through and I've explained what that whole situation was from my perspective, and then after like 10 hours of watching videos and trying to figure out kind of what happened, it would be inaccurate. If you know what really happened, I think it'd be very inaccurate to call it, even even a storming isn't the best term, but an insurrection certainly not. A revolution, no. The revolution's what happened inside when they affirmed a vote that it was fraudulent. But the the issue, the main thing that really, if you want to cut through everything, the main thing that it was just a confusing situation. Complete confusion. There were bad people. There were infiltrators. There were aggressive Q and Trump people. There were, and then 99% of the people were outside the Capitol having no clue what was going on inside, just thinking that they were rallying in support of voter integrity, etc., election integrity. There's this video of a guy who goes in, and he goes in. He's not the front. He's not fighting police or anything. He says he's being very respectful, but he felt like, I guess he was invited in or whatever. Ends up making his way to, I guess it was the Congress and the House, I think, or no, the Senate. The Senate's, I think, where he ended up, and he just prayed there with a couple other people. They just prayed, asked the Lord's blessing, and left. Didn't do anything. So anyway, that's what he did, and so David French retweets this video, and I'll read you guys and get your reaction. The evidence that January 6th was a Christian insurrection just grows and grows and grows. Combating this perversion of the gospel has to be a top priority. It's not just a heresy, it's an active threat to the peace and security of the nation. Reaction.
And he thinks this guy going there and praying is emblematic of that statement.
Is that the point?
I mean, the only other thing in the video this guy said was that, he said he referenced a flag in the Revolutionary War called the Appeal to Heaven, the pine tree flag, and he said, "Hey, there were some people with that flag." It was because this is kind of where we're. The exact quote that David French retweeted was, "One guy up there said we should pray, and some of us did. He was on his bullhorn microphone thing, and he just consecrated it to Jesus." ... That to me was the ultimate statement of where we were at in this movement.
So that's his example of insurrection?
And he used the ... in between that is, it's an appeal to heaven. We just need God because he's saying we're small, we don't have much of a voice, but we just need God to help us. That's all it is. That's literally all it is. So David
we
French...
are all insurrectionists!
It's so sinister. I can understand why David French is just quaking, because it's a sinister.
This is the guy who did nothing about CRT or the woke stuff or any of the.
Well, the French have a tendency to flee.
You know,
oh,
a French tank has 9 reverse gears and 1 forward gear. Right. So
this is not the direction I saw this going. So what do you think about?
Is that ad hominem? We probably should think of something more substantive.
Don't be.
Let me tell you what Gordon would say.
Oh gosh.
We can spare.
Don't do Gordon. Okay. So the first thing he says, the evidence that January 6th was a Christian insurrection. January 6th was a Christian insurrection.
Well, we'd have to define what insurrection is. So insurrection is an uprising from within, but it's
usually violent, right?
Well, and usually large in scale. We're talking about a bunch of people who.
A couple hundred who went in the Capitol.
And we've seen the videos of people just walking around and their security guards walking.
They're staying in the lines. They're picking up trash. There's a few videos of people chasing security. There's one where they're chasing a security guard. There's a few where they're knocking down barriers.
Yeah.
And then there's
the one who got shot.
And some messed up Nancy Pelosi's office and stuff. But which was all wrong, but. Christian insurrection?
I mean, insurrection that implies an overturning of whatever the authority is there and a commandeering of
like Chaz. Is Chaz an insurrection?
Did
David French talk about Chaz being in it?
It seems like David French and those who would toe the David French line. Your Russell Moore, your I guess Big Even General, your TGC. It seems like they're the real nationalists. Because we went through and this is continuously called whataboutism, which I don't even know. I don't know when that became a thing. But
what about
over the last, because it's where were you? That's what the reaction would be from the right. Where were you over the last 8-9 months when cities were burning down? When this whole story that we came here to, where a guy just lost his business, it seems like the appearance, especially from Mr. French, is that none of that stuff really mattered enough to address it. But when you attack the national capital, well, now that's an issue. So it seems like the nationalist is actually David French because he only seems to care about the national.
That's a good
thing.
point.
Like, that's the only place that matters. Anywhere
Yeah.
else doesn't.
Well, you think about it, the Black Lives Matter and Antifa guys were taking down monuments and landmarks and stuff like all over this country, desecrating things, ripping
Private
down
citizens
signs.
and businesses.
I mean, you talk about a revolution. They were renaming, pushing for political, town boards and stuff to rename streets and and they literally were saying they're revolutionaries. A lot of them, they're like, yeah, we're doing a revolution here. But and that didn't matter until it was the national capital. Now all of a sudden, that's a good point. I never thought of that.
Because it's only the federal building. That's the only the sacred. Sacred
no.
federal
Nancy Pelosi. Temple of Democracy is what
Temple
Nancy
of
Pelosi
Democracy.
said. And I'm like, where were you on? So like ripping down Lincoln statues and Robert E. Lee statues and Columbus statues, not important. But the Temple of Democracy.
Well, and just American citizens.
And
right?
how many
Shot
state
in the
capitals
street.
were entered? Weren't there like 4 state capitals that were occupied? You had the Chaz thing, where they were in federal, or they actually they went in federal buildings I think too, but state and local buildings.
And the federal assault in Portland that went on for like 100-something days.
Yeah, I've lost track.
You had one? Did you have one in Michigan? I think where they went in and.
Yeah, I think so. I'm dizzy from 2020.
Yeah,
so.
we all are.
So it's not. The point is it's not whataboutism to say. It's not what about this. It's you've already proven that that you have no concern for this. This means nothing to you. It's just you. You're a nationalist. You're such a nationalist that you only care about this national building.
And
David French is a nationalist.
Now you're not calling him a Christian, just a nationalist.
I don't know where he's at faith-wise.
Okay.
I mean, that seems
he's
like
All right, David
nationalist
French,
behavior to
I
me.
think
if you're
you made a
watching,
good argument on that.
David French, if you're
David
watching,
French is a nationalist. Russell Morey is a nationalist. They're nationalists. I'm not a nationalist.
I'm a localist.
Because I got a problem with when private businesses and monuments that you put up in your local town. I got a problem when that stuff happens. The Capitol, no, it's not cool, but that's a federal building. I mean, that's not. You're a nationalist. You only care about the federal. I mean,
yeah, like where were you when it wasn't the federal or the national?
The entire thing is like you have this violent movement that like burns down people's businesses, destroys all this stuff, ruins people's lives privately. And that's like we're not going to say anything about that. But then like when a bunch of people have one issue and they go to the one building where that issue, you're like,
well, actually, so the logic would lend itself to this because this happened last summer. You could have Washington D.C. on fire everywhere around the Capitol. Banks
as long as
doesn't hurt the
Capitol.
Yeah. But like the bank alarms going off, grocery stores and convenience stores and electronic stores robbed, people taking out big screen TVs, fires everywhere, bombs going up, people getting killed. Like as long as it's around the Capitol,
that's okay.
We got to understand that and nuance that. But as soon as you go into the Bullhorn Man, Viking Man goes into the Capitol for 45 minutes, all bets are off. Like that's what a nationalist would say.
That's a nationalist.
Yeah.
I care about my local town, my local. I do have a concern, I guess, for the federal government, but my local town. I mean, if my local town was burning down, burst the Capitol. I mean, I care about my village. I mean, only nationalists would just care about the federal building.
Okay, we've beat that dead horse. All right, so here's the next sentence. Combating this perversion of the gospel has to be a top priority. It's not just heresy; it's an active threat to the peace and security of the nation.
David French's nationalism is the real
nation.
threat.
Yeah,
I think.
David, what's a nation?
He cares about the nation quite a bit.
I'm sure he does. I don't know. I mean,
and it's a perversion of the gospel to go to think that it's okay to go in. So this guy's ignorant or whatever, but to go in and then pray in the Senate chamber and ask for God's blessing, that's a perversion of the gospel.
Well, because in the Good and Plenty clause, it mentions about the separation of gospel and capital. I don't know if you know that. That's essential, and that's also
it's the
a
two
gospel
kingdoms.
issue.
Yeah.
There's two kingdoms, tale of two cities. Whatnot.
Okay, well that was David French. Another thing here, I'll read to you. This someone sent me this morning. I'll just read you the headline to get your reaction first. This is from 9 Marks. Forum. How to shepherd your people in light of the Capitol riot.
No, more nationalism.
Did they do like how to I mean, they kind of like sided with BLM-ish, right?
Well, Mark Devers said that, he said BLM seems like a very pro-life statement. Pro-life.
Well, they also both, like in 2015, him and Jonathan Lehman, I think, said it was like a gospel issue too. But recently, I know like Jonathan Lehman at least, he's marched with that like semi-BLM, whatever it was, with Thibidi Annabwile and David Platt, I think.
It's brave.
It is brave. It's brave. Now, I'll give them a little bit of a pass on the nationalism because they're in the capital. They do live.
It's Capitol Hill.
Yeah,
rival.
they live in the Washington D.C., but it's still nationalism. I mean, I don't think you can forgive it.
Okay. So they feel like there's a big need to shepherd people in light of the Capitol riot. Okay, before we even read any of this, how would you shepherd people in light of the Capitol riot?
How would I? Well, I would probably look to how I shepherded people through all of the riots and violence and mayhem and church shutdowns that went on for the last 9 months. I'd look at that.
They'd already be prepared.
And I'd think, okay, so an event that affects a fraction of that amount of people and did a fraction, as much as, you know, those who actually went and destroyed things, you know, that's not anything we can condone, and that's you know, insufferable. But at the same time, I don't know, like, what is that? Like, seriously, in comparison to all the BLM riots, you know, storming of the cities of this year, what is that? Like, what fraction of 1% is the Capitol situation? I would look at how I addressed the much more enormous BLM.
So you wouldn't feel the need to have a forum for like, this is a separate thing, like this whole Capitol thing.
I probably wouldn't. But
you'd be like, my people are prepared for this already.
I would certainly hope so.
Okay.
I would print out the article, and I would use it as I would go to Minneapolis. I would go downtown, I would find Christians, and I would say, and I'm standing next to a building that's completely, you know, burned to the ground, I'd say, let me talk to you about the Capitol riots. And I would say,
I'll be honest.
Do you need some shepherding?
We're in Chicago right now, and we've been driving around, and we're seeing kind of the way people live and stuff. Like shepherding people right now in light of the Capitol riot, like, I don't know.
It is not on their radar.
It is not not number one priority. It's the issues that actual real people now for them, maybe living so close to the Capitol, that's a different
I can
story,
see that
maybe.
locally being a
right,
deal,
but the city was burning down like long before the Capitol.
No, but you don't. That's not a gospel. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard when you're a nationalist like they are.
So I don't even. So here's the points they make. They make 3 points, and then I don't even know. Should I just read this? It's not like horribly long. So the first point. All right. Pastoral Reminders. That's what these are.
Right.
God is still in control. A simple statement is undoubtedly the Christian's go-to statement during times of turbulence. It may feel like an overuse remedy. I'm just saying that heavenly Jerusalem is not affected by the earth. We should see America's state and mourn, yet with hope and anticipation of the more perfect dwelling which awaits us. So think about heaven in light of the Capitol riot. But no one's being threatened right now in light of the Capitol riots. It's not
like it's done.
That's over. We have like 25,000 troops about in D.C. right. So, I mean, it's true. God's still in control, but it just, I don't know.
It seems. I mean, you're only on the first point, so I probably shouldn't say this yet, but I will. It just seems really lazy. It seems like another one of those like TGC formula machines where you put in like a title and then a couple of like adjectives and then like 2 nouns and then it spits out an article.
God is still
you could have written this after 9/11. You could have like there's literally anything that bad.
It's not specific to
when
the
your
Capitol.
cat dies. Shepherding your flock through your cat's death. Like, it's the same thing. Like, there's, it's like God's still in control. Yes, he is, but like, what is specifically in this situation?
But they feel a need to specifically respond to this incident. All right, so rebelling against the government is not a sin limited to one political party. Number 2, when a friend asked me if I'd heard that protesters had stormed the Capitol, I immediately assumed it was people on the left. he went on to tell me
What a
it
bigot.
was
Man,
it
wow.
was Trump. It was Trump supporters. What this reminded me of, and something that I will remind my people of, is that sinfulness exists along the entire political spectrum.
Who wrote this?
I
Who's
don't
the author? Is it Mark Dever?
I don't know. It's like a
It's by a bunch of people, because I just want to know. It says it's like first person. It's like somebody told. Like, were you not watching any news? Like, you didn't know? It's like someone told me, hey, like you live in Washington D.C. I'm assuming, and somebody came to me and said, did you know that there was a riot at the Capitol?
I don't know.
And you
It
said,
might be this.
Was it the left? No, it was Trump supporters. Like, how you weren't paying attention to anything the entire day?
Well, I mean, it's possible. I mean, it's possible for someone the first time they've heard.
You got a lot of patience for these nationalists.
Okay, but
I don't.
all right. I think it might be this guy, Mr. Ross, who I think is from South Carolina, actually, who
Mr.
participated in the forum.
Oh, okay.
Maybe, I'm not sure.
All right, I'm sorry.
So there might not be someone.
Okay.
It might not be someone.
I slightly retract.
Slightly.
Slightly.
So, but anyway, okay. So this is a true statement, though. I mean, take it seriously. This is a true statement. Violence. Everyone's capable of violence, right?
Right. I mean, I think we all, as humans,
Technically,
know
that is the truth. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is an oversimplification, though. I was in D.C. I was near the Capitol when this was going on, and it would. And now I've watched like tons of video. I've tried to get to the bottom of what actually happened, and it, like I said, it was chaos. There were Trump supporters in there. There were also Antifa and radical elements, and we don't even know who all. We're still figuring some of this out. Who used crowd control techniques. I mean, this wasn't even inspired by Trump. So I'll put it this way: the most committed Trump supporters weren't even at the Capitol, because they would have listened to the president's speech. It took about 45 minutes at least to get to the Capitol from the speech, and the riot, if you want to call it that, I don't call it that, but what people are calling it, that started before Trump was even finished speaking. So the people who stormed or went in, had in the areas in which there was a struggle to get in, they missed all of Trump's speech. They would have had to.
Well, when you're a real big Trump fan, I mean, one of the first things you do is you leave within the first 5 minutes of his speech and then just go start rioting.
Storm the Capitol.
That's all the hardcore Trump folks I know are
There's a high precedent for it.
Yeah, they just leave before you even start speaking and just start breaking stuff else.
So I mean, it's true that this can happen on the right, but it's not. I think accuracy is important here to just say, like, look, this isn't. It wasn't just. If you put a headline, Trump supporters storm Capitol, is that true? There's a sense in which, yeah, there were Trump supporters who went in there, but it's not the complete truth, and it would actually be leaving something very critical out. It wasn't just Trump supporters, and the 99% of people outside, the almost like 1 million people outside, who had no clue about any of this, who were there to support election integrity, should not be broad brushed with them, which is what's happened.
Isn't that slander? Like, TGC 9 marks types, I feel like they're really into, like, refraining from slander. So it seems like it would be kind of slanderous to paint all of the people at the rally who were peaceful as, insurrectionists.
Yeah, and I don't think, he just saying it was true. He went on to tell me it was Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol. And then goes on to say, sinfulness, people on the right can be sinful. And we must actively orientate ourselves away from the godless expressions of power, fear, and false hope. And it's, I don't know, that language there is just the godless expressions of power. Like, not everyone who went in there was, it's the broad brushing, I guess, is what I'm having trouble with. Is like, they weren't, a lot of people thought they were let in because there's video of them being let in. A lot of people came, most people didn't know that there was any struggle, if there was. So they're walking in, and the police are even welcoming them, taking selfies with them. They shouldn't be broad brushed with this.
Well, the broad brushing is frustrating because Jonathan Lehman marched in a BLM march. BLM march. But he didn't burn anything down, and nobody would say, like, yeah, Jonathan Lehman, he's one of those guys that burns things down. No, like, we know that what he did, he marched. Now the organization that he marched in support of, they do burn things down.
And when I took issue with
there is a separation, and we've all acknowledged it.
When I took issue with the narrative of BLM, it's like I wouldn't support the lies that they're propagating, and looking, being part of that movement. or even making it look that way. I mean, you got to make some really clear separations. If you're, I mean, well, I don't want to go into all the details of give my whole response to that, but at no time did we or anyone else on the conservative side say like, oh, Lehman's responsible for burning down Washington D.C. No one thought that I know of. But there seems to be that sort of, they're okay with blaming Trump supporters for this.
Right, and he mentions godless expressions of power. Now, maybe I'm just
Sounds
a little
Foucault.
It does sound very Foucaultian, does it not? But wouldn't if we're thinking in those terms, wouldn't a godless expression of power be, I don't know, like having an election and then having people vote and then throwing in like millions of fake votes? Has there been any comment from him on that?
Maybe like 3 a.m. after this quote unquote storming, there was a godless expression of power.
Right.
In the same building, but it was by men. I mean, that was the actual insurrection, revolution, whatever you want to call it.
Did 30,000 like soldiers in the Capitol, does that corrupt the temple of democracy?
You don't need to shepherd your people through that.
Oh, you don't. Okay.
You don't need to shepherd your people through rigged elections or all the arm twisting that went into what happened at 3 a.m.
It's just funny though because you
have to shepherd your people through Viking Man.
But that's a nationalist move. I mean, think of like the 1930s. Like the first thing that you do is like, we only care about this federal building. The second thing is like, let's like show our strength. That's a very like Hitlerian, like nationalist kind of move to do. I'm just like,
you guys are nationalists.
That's what I'm seeing as
all right. Third point. America is no utopia.
Ouch! What a
burn! Ouch! Yeah. Never figured that one out.
No one. Is there someone who thought that America was a utopia?
I've not heard this as a mainstream argument.
To shepherd your people, to like, oh, all these people are believing America's utopia, guys. Like, if it didn't occur to you after the COVID lockdowns and all the burning cities, it should become clear to you now that it's not a utopia because of Viking Man and everyone who came.
I've honestly spent the last 12 months thinking that it was a utopia.
I think after 2020, no one thinks America's a utopia. So I'll read it. From my observations, it seems that the motivation behind a lot of the rioting and protests has been rooted in a desire for America's political structure to provide the best life now. I was, listen,
as opposed to
Mr. Ross, if you wrote this, I was there. I don't think one person, and I'll be honest, I don't think one person in that audience of about 1 million people thought that America's political structure was to provide your best life now. People are upset about election integrity. There was people there, like myself, who weren't even huge Trump fans, who were there, and I know people in the audience, 5 different areas in the audience. I've talked to people. I talked to even former intelligence people about what happened. And I have some interesting thoughts on that, but not for this show. But no one that I know of, I never once got the impression anyone thought that. That's just, I'm sorry, that's just wrong. It's flat out wrong. To care about election integrity isn't like wanting something that's so abnormal and Pollyanna-like. It's just it's how our country's supposed to function, and if we don't have it, none of our other rights are really that secure. So he goes on, we too easily put our hopes in the nation instead of in Christ and his people. False dichotomy. Like, that's like saying, oh, we don't put our hope in our family, like our mom and dad and our wives and kids. We need to put it in the church. Like, what? You have both? You should have, like, there's a place for both of those things. I can be a citizen, a patriot. I can be a husband. I can be a father. I can be a churchman. I can be a business owner, and I can do all those things. And it doesn't mean like, oh, I'm putting hope in my business because I work hard. Or I'm putting hope in America because I vote and I mean,
it almost implies you can, like, what? So we don't participate at all in whatever spheres that the Lord's placed us in? Like,
it's slander.
It would be idolatry to engage and to care, like, to try and better it in any way, or to try and, apply biblical principles in how we engage in that. I mean, I don't know. It just...
Yeah, it seems slanderous to me. Like, it's a false dichotomy. Like,
there's an underlying... this has been going on for a while within, like, the Big Evo world, but there's, like, this underlying sort of, like, you know what? You want to hold on to your American dream kind of life, but, you know what? Christian... persecution for Christians, that's normal. And, like... to that, I just wonder, where were all you guys? We're the ones here telling the story about Nini's Deli. Where are you guys? You don't care. There's been no interest in that. The stories of actual Christian persecution going on.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point. Like, these ministries, like 9 Marks would be included in this, and this isn't maybe what they're tailor-made for, but like, there's all these ministries that have tons of money and resources, and all we need is like $10,000 to tell this story of real Christian persecution. And I asked them, I said, did you get support from other churches to the Riescos? Nope. Did other Christians in the area? Nope. Christians came out to protest them. How about, like, had anyone else reached out to you? Like, one guy on a podcast. No one has reached out to them to even tell their story. And it's just incredible, because it did make secular news. And, like, and we're here. You know, what does that say about you guys? Like, that your priorities are so out of whack.
Not even a retweet. Nothing.
Yeah, well, like, what does... the real threats to the church right now, you turn, like, a blind eye to, or you nuance, or you downplay, and then something that's really not that big of a threat, that's pretty clear, you join the mainstream media narrative on. And it just...
you shepherd your flock through the...
It seems like a mixed up set of priorities there.
Totally. No sense of proportion. The church is, let's see, okay, I intend to remind my people that as Christians, our best lives come from the redemption we have in Christ, and therefore we have the ability to live amidst whatever political leadership the Lord's sovereignty appoints, striving with joy to honor the Lord. It almost makes it, yeah.
Great, that's good stuff. Now do BLM.
Yeah, of course. We do want to have the ability to live amidst whatever political leadership the Lord appoints, but at the same time, like, you realize there's really big consequences for the kind of leadership, and we're supposed to, in theory, have a republic. The leaders that we have chosen or have been chosen for us, I guess, are going to have great effects on the church, and that's what people need to. They have a lot of ideas. What are some of the questions people have right now? Like, should I submit to someone who is a usurper, didn't actually win? Do I have to submit to that person? How about, like, the COVID shot? Like, do I have to take that if my job or the government tells me I should? What are some of the other questions that are out there right now that legitimately need shepherding answers? What can you think of?
Oh, like, say if the state tells me, oh, I gotta close my business for like another 2-3 months, weeks, years, whatever it is. Is that a could you shepherd me through, like, me being forced out of a livelihood, forced out of working, providing for my family?
Hyde Amendment.
The Hyde Amendment?
Yeah, I'm going to have to fund abortion. Do I pay taxes?
Or how about day one of Biden's presidency? He's already vowed that he's going to have an executive order basically mandating transgender people should be allowed in whatever bathroom they want in public schools. So you're a public school teacher and you're a Christian. How do you navigate that? Maybe we could use some shepherding from people like 9 Marks. But instead we're talking about Viking Man in the Capitol.
Well, fortunately, I heard that he's being fed his vegan shaman diet where he's being held. So I'm glad that they're able to accommodate that.
He's not even, he's an environmentalist wacko. Anyway. He's not your typical MAGA kind of guy. He's into shamanism, food that's organic and protesting climate change. But anyway, this is just a sample. I'm not even going to read the rest of it. This is just a sample of what 9 Marks is putting out there. It's weird. It's like skipping over all, like, the relevant things that people actually have questions about, only to join in the media parade to condemn something that, like, if you're going to use equal weights and measures, you should have been 100 times more motivated to condemn when it was happening in a greater proportion during the summer. And so it's a weird.
I think I know why this.
Yeah, why are they writing it?
And this is the segue. The reason why 9 Marks, TGC, French, all these, is because they consume mainstream news. That's where they get all their information. So of course they think this is the big issue. That's the mainstream news that they're watching. This is all they get. This is the news. This is what they're getting.
This is the most. That's what they're consuming. That's what they. So you're saying they buy that narrative?
Yeah, they buy the narrative because that's what they consume.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the reason.
Yeah.
For most of the people who I know who are believers but would go in that direction, yeah, I would say that's the same diagnosis.
So along that line, let's talk about something that I've talked about before, and I probably will talk about again. I just jotted down some notes on the plane for like 10 minutes. And I sense that it's important to do this now, because there's you've heard the term fake news, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of I think because the mainstream media has been so untrustworthy, and they've lied so many times, and they've spun narratives, they've lost so much credibility that now there's almost there's like it's a fractured panoply of blogs, and there's organizations starting up, conservative news networks, because people don't even trust Fox now, and the dust hasn't settled yet. And so people are getting information from all kinds of places. Add to that the fact that censorship has been through the roof like we've never seen it in the history of the world. And that's true, guys. Yeah, you can go to certain countries, communist countries, and see censorship issues that are even worse. But I'm saying, like, on this kind of a scale, this quickly with this, we've never deleted this much information ever, because we didn't have this much information because of the internet. And all of a sudden, all these people deplatformed, news organizations gone, websites gone, and people are scrambling, some people on the right, conservatives who don't trust the mainstream media, and they're scrambling to find, where can I get accurate information? So, a few principles. We'll go to principles and we'll go to sources. What kinds of principles do you use when you're trying to figure out whether a source is accurate or whether you should listen to a source?
Are they wearing a mask while they're talking to me? Because if so, I'm just, I'm exaggerating.
Make sure they wear a mask, yeah. But you can't find out when they're, it's a written format. You don't know if they wrote it wearing a mask. You just
That's
don't
true,
know.
that might have happened.
Could have, yeah. Okay, no, but in all seriousness, all right, I'll give the first one. Something I thought of. Someone who consistently spills secrets does not make a trustworthy source, because people generally won't entrust secrets to someone who's a leaker like that. Now, there might be some exceptions to this, so I was pondering this. There's some organizations that they thrive on leaking WikiLeaks, right? Like, people come to them as a format to leak. Project Veritas, yeah. There's some sources like that. But what I'm saying, I'm not talking about an organization like that. I'm talking about someone who shares information of a private nature that no one else has, that they're saying they're getting it from the dangerous information, right? Information that would get someone in trouble, that someone wouldn't want shared, but they're sharing it. And they're doing it consistently all the time. That's their whole shtick. People have sent me videos by guys who, like, I look at, and they're like saying things like, Trump, they know exactly what Trump's going to do in the next couple days. And he's going to come out on top, and it's like so specific. And yet there's people, even people I know that have administration connections who, like, they're like, no, like, so, but people, some of these sources will say it. I'm thinking of one guy in particular, I can't remember his name, on YouTube. He's like saying it nonchalantly, but he's so certain. And I'm thinking, and I look through like some of his videos, I'm like, who is this guy? And I'm like, oh, he's consistently sharing these secrets, supposedly, that, giving you the real inside scoop of what's going on in DC. But, like, if that guy's really connected to Trump or to someone close to Trump, then, like, they're not picking a dude on YouTube with this dangerous information to probably put out there.
Probably
who's
not.
sharing it like that. So he's not a trustworthy source I don't take him seriously, in my opinion, just because I don't think someone I wouldn't personally, just human nature, I wouldn't go entrust secrets that could get me in trouble to someone who's a leaker. Does that make sense? Can you articulate it better?
Yeah. If somebody says that they have an inside scoop, but all they have are inside scoops, they probably don't have many scoops.
Yeah.
They're just trying to benefit off of the illusion that they have scoops.
So there's nothing you can confirm in any part of their narrative. It's just all like this.
Yeah. But like that would coincide with one of my rules, which is, some sources are Like, where did you get this information? If there's nothing, if there's just no way to verify anything, it's not really a source. That's not really a.
Okay, let me try to compare. I don't know if these are the best comparisons, but two things. So there's this guy I just talked about, but then there was like a few days ago, Mike Lindell met with President Trump, and he has 100 pages of like he said I guess he spent like millions of dollars hiring lawyers and just being. I think he's even teamed up with Sidney Powell. I'm not sure to what extent, but. He has information on this Leonardo scandal, which I've looked into that, and that is legitimate. There's Italian newspapers reporting on this, that the election, that there was vote switches going on from the embassy in Italy. So I've already looked into that. There's if you want to do the digging, you can find it. It's getting harder because of all the censorship. But Mike Lindell is saying, I got 100 pages here, and he says, I know, based on this information of just these vote switches, how many votes Trump got, how many votes Biden got. Now, do I take a source like that seriously? I kind of do, and the reason is, and I'm not saying I would love to look at those sources first. I'm not going to trot it out there as, I know for sure that this is all kosher. But what I would say is that Mike Lindell has a lot to lose by saying something like that. He's taking a great personal risk to himself to do that. To his business, to getting canceled, etc. Because right now everyone's getting canceled who's doing that, and he is risking it all to try to get that information to the president, to try to get that information to us. And yes, I can find some things that seem to verify aspects of his story. And I'm looking forward to more information coming out, if he can ever bring it out. If they, So I tend to take that seriously and say, okay, that's a lead I'll follow. Because human nature would dictate that's, unless that was true, you wouldn't say that. Right? Because he has a lot to lose. But someone who's on a YouTube channel who has nothing to lose, but is just leaking this information nonchalantly, I'm not going to trust that guy. Yeah. Does that make...
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, with the whole voter fraud issue, the affidavits, the number of affidavits, and like reading some of them, that's it's illegal. If you're lying about this, there's legal repercussions. So what is your skin in the game? So if you're sharing information, what skin do you have in the game? That would give you some credibility. I feel like my main criteria for media, how to know what's true, what information to follow, in light of 2020 is, my guiding principle is, does this media source ask you to deny what you have seen with your own eyes and know to be objectively true? And 2020 has been pre-2020, I would read Fox News for headlines. I used to go to Daily Wire to read sort of commentary. And then I would go to BBC World News because news in the United States is very self-contained. It tends, unfortunately, like David French, it tends to be very nationalistic. And so...
David French, you are a nationalist.
A nationalist.
Yeah.
So the idea that kind of is perpetuated is that, like, the only news that really happens is in the United States. And, like, if you go to, like... I remember the one that always sticks in my mind is this is when I first started to realize this. The Las Vegas, remember the Las Vegas shooting in 2017, I believe it was?
I hardly remember it.
Right, because there's been so much. But
you were so young.
That was October 1st, 2017. I think it was a few days later, there was a terrorist attack in Somalia. It was one of the largest in history. It led to the deaths of over 800 people.
Oh, yeah.
There were truck bombs that went off in Mogadishu, and it was 500 people dead instantaneously, right? I saw some of the pictures of some of the most horrifying things I've ever seen in my life. And then over 300 people died later from their wounds. Now, probably you never even heard of that. You probably didn't even know that happened because, like you're saying, proportionality. So it's like, what is actually true? So...
that's a lot of that. I will say that's a lot of Black lives too. Black Lives Matter.
A lot of Black lives, yeah. And that was kind of that was when Black Lives Matter was starting to get going. Yeah. I remember thinking, like, that is like 500 Black lives gone, and there was no interest, no concern, and reporters didn't even go over it because, right, it's
Can you blame it on
Right.
colonialism? I don't think you can. So
on
why,
Somalia.
you know?
So one of in 2020 it's
So sad.
it's the the CNN reporter standing with the building burning behind saying it's fiery but peaceful. With the whole Antifa stuff, I remember a lot of people were talking throughout 2020 saying, you think things are gonna get violent, and I was like, Antifa, they're some thugs, but they're like they're not. One side has all the guns. Until I saw Antifa in the woods practicing with guns, I actually ran into some Antifa members, with a learning how to shoot clinic. This is a few months ago, and so what I have seen now objectively with my eyes does not comport with reality. I have been to several places throughout the country. I haven't seen people dying on the street of COVID. I know people who work in hospitals in several different places. The hospitals aren't packed full of people dying of COVID, at least not as widespread as the media reports. So if it doesn't objectively line up with what I know is true, based on my own senses, what I actually see, then that would be a pretty big criteria.
Right. No, that's a good point. I have a few examples in my mind of the same thing where I was at an event. This has happened 4 times in my life, or 5 times, where I saw the reports later, and I'm like, wow, they really distorted what I just saw, so I'm not going to trust them. One of the other criteria that I like to apply is, are multiple separate sources confirming this? And that doesn't mean it's true, because you can go to CNN and you're going to find out, every mainstream media, they have the same narrative. But if it's only one source, and it doesn't mean it's not true, but it just, if you have sources that you already trust, and you have more than one, and this is a principle you see in Scripture even, 2 or 3 witnesses, right? If I can see a couple people are confirming it, that strengthens my confidence in a story. I view, this is my personal thing, is I view mainstream media as one source, actually. I don't look at mainstream media as multiple sources, really, just because I know much of mainstream media, I'm not saying all of it, but just because I know that they are feeding the same narrative, they have the same agenda. But if I see, let's say, someone that I don't really know, Patrick Byrne, says something about the election, and then I'm like, okay, I don't know who Patrick Byrne, got a lot to lose, former CEO, I'm gonna listen, but let me wait to see. And then I see that, oh look, the Epoch Times is also talking about the same thing. Okay, so some reporters from the Epoch Times, which I tend to trust a little more, they checked it out. There must be something to this. So that's another thing, 2 or 3 witness thing. That's I think a way to help boost your confidence in a story. What are you name some of the sources? What about for you, Andrew? What are some of the sources you like to look to for news, and why do you like them? Or
I don't use those sources anymore. Right?
Oh, well, why don't you go first and tell us what sources you use now, if you have any?
Well, it's for headlines, I'm looking at OAN.
OAN, which
One
is
American News.
One American News,
yeah. I really relied on Twitter. There was specific people I followed that
don't rely on Twitter.
But now I don't, because a lot of those voices are gone. They've been shut down, and not Twitter and just individuals, but news organizations, because there was a multiplicity of people that you can follow at the same time.
And there's a pattern. You can, this person was right about this, right about this, right? Okay, build.
But I can't use it anymore because So I'll go for a headline. I'll go to One American News. Other than that, I'll listen to see what people are saying. I don't.
Conversations that matter.
Conversations, yeah.
I'm the source now.
CTM.
See, but seriously though, that is it. If you can, check for yourself. You were at the Capitol, so you kind of...
Oh, yeah. I am a source for the Capitol thing, at least parts of it, just because I gave my little slice of the pie, and it did not comport with the mainstream media narrative, and it doesn't... I don't justify the bad things that happen. There's some bad things that happen, but it's it's way out of proportion the way that it's being reported. So, but Andrew, what about you? What sources do you have any?
Well, first off, when you said check for yourself, that kind of flashed me back to LeVar Burton at the
I'm sorry.
Rainbow saying,
"Yeah,
you don't have to take my word for it." Remember that? I think you said that. That was good.
I accidentally got your name wrong, Raul.
Oh,
please.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Sorry. Fake news.
Why did I respond to that name that wasn't my name? Yeah. No.
Fake news.
Yeah, everyone knows me as good old Raul.
What does Raul read?
Well, Raul used to read a lot of Drudge. I remember back in the day, I remember for years using the Drudge method of seeing, okay, what's he spitting out over here? And man, I haven't gone to Drudge in like 5 or 6 years now.
So are you all homeless? You just don't have.
I'm sort of homeless. I mean, I like there are some sources, some pundits who I've liked for some years. I mean, I like some of the Blaze guys. I like Mark Levin and some of the folks that he had on his
Blaze. So Elijah Schaefer. I follow him because he's at all the riots. He's been at he was at the Capitol. The stuff that he says has consistently lined up with what a multiplicity of sources will say later. So, he's a source, he's actually there, he's actually seeing what's going on. If the media's spinning it, then he'll spin it back the other direction. I mean, not spin it, but he'll tell you the truth. So, I'm really becoming more of a fan of individual people who are at places, physically. Not big, giant corporation organizations that
have an agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, so I like, and this is brand new for me, kind of, but I think the Epoch Times has some pretty good stuff. Their YouTube channel is even really good.
Their commercials are really good, but they're almost like too good. Like I've seen some of the.
There's probably people watching this probably already saw an advertisement for the Epoch Times before they even started this video. So Epoch Times is one. I actually bought a subscription for 2 family members who like papers. And so I get the digital updates every day, and sometimes I'll look at those headlines. I tend to... Now, I don't know... So, okay, I don't read articles at Breitbart, but I will... This is more of a recent thing. I started going to Breitbart just to see their headlines, what they're promoting. Because I know they have this sort of... They're like a pro-Trump kind of... So, during the whole election thing, I wanted to... When everyone, including Fox News, seemed to be against... Trump and like suppressing the election integrity story, I was like, okay, I wonder what Breitbart's saying about this, because I would expect them to not go with that narrative, but they haven't been like a consistent news source for me. I used to do Daily Wire more. I don't really do Daily Wire anymore much, and I think I still have a subscription to them, and it's nice to be able to, if someone sends me a link, I can go look it up. There's a few guys that I kind of like there, but I don't know. It's too, I don't know what it is about it. I haven't gone there much. The Blaze a little bit, but I haven't, honestly, Blaze stories to me lately have been wanting a little bit too. They're kind of, I don't know what it is about them. Maybe you can articulate it. They don't give me the meat that I'm looking for. It's like there's a little bit of like headline. It's like a headline with like like 2 paragraphs and ads, and I'm like, a lot of ads. Yeah, like I don't really. Why did I click on this?
It's a little clickbaitish.
Yeah, it's a little clickbaitish for me. So I'm feeling the same thing you guys are feeling right now.
My frustration has been the not being able to have any like world news. I really don't know quite who to rely on for world news. Like, if I want to know what's going on outside of the United States, it's hard to know what's going on inside the United States. It's very hard to know what's going on outside.
I kind of like the Sky News Australia.
I do. I have followed them more. Yeah, because
they're against the Great Reset, and
they'll actually report on stuff in the United States, and you're like, wait,
better
what?
than the United States.
So yeah, Sky News Australia. Yeah,
Sky News Australia is good. I also, OAN's another one I've started to watch more whenever I don't watch stuff much, but and then the other one is I think it's called Real America's Voice, is another. It's kind of like OAN, but they have some shows on there, and I've turned that on a few times, and usually it's better commentary. I tried Newsmax, and it's okay. Like, that's all I have to say about Newsmax.
I prefer to OAN, I think, to Newsmax.
Yeah, I think I do too, a little bit.
There's also Right Side, which is not, it's not a comprehensive news organization, but they do send people to specific places to like record things. So like they have a guy in DC right now just walking around filming all the barriers. So
right. And I know some guys there's some guys I follow on social media, like Andy No. Andy No is a great source on Antifa and the right. He's great. Jack Posabic. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it, or Prosabic. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. But he's a guy who's also lives in DC, takes a lot of footage of DC. So again, I guess I'm going to that too. I'm going to sources that I've seen over time have been accurate about things. So I know they're trustworthy. They seem like they're after the truth. I can verify it over time. Again, if I can find sources that agree with each other, that strengthens what's being said.
Can I throw one out? That
Yeah,
I
go for it.
earlier?
Go for it.
Yeah, because I consume more from just like, if I find someone who over a period of time I've found them to be really trustworthy and they've broken good stuff, I just follow their accounts. And Alex Berenson, I really like him for he's an individual account, but particularly on COVID hysteria and hypocrisy and what's going on in the bigger picture with that. He's got a Twitter account that's worth following. He did a book called like Unreported Truths that Amazon tried to take off of from sales, and like Elon Musk stepped in and helped funded that somehow. If they're not being censored, I don't trust them. Yeah, when people are really trying to censor you, I'm pricking up my ears.
Yeah,
so.
that is actually a pretty good rule.
Yeah, because if they're willing to take risks to get the truth out there, I respect reporters like that. That doesn't mean they're always accurate, but it does mean that there's more of a chance that they could be telling the truth. And those who have a similar, those who have the same kind of anthropology, or basically the same, like their view of man, their religious views tend to line up more. They believe there is objective truth. That's really important.
That's really the big one, right?
You actually believe there's objective truth that happens in real time, then I think there's a big divide there.
Mainstream doesn't.
No, they don't. The mainstream media doesn't believe in objective truth.
It's all about narrative truth.
Yes.
Truth is determined by narrative. So
Find your story.
That's the big.
And your story better be social justice or else.
We don't need the black perspective on this, or the Asian perspective, or the white we don't need panels telling us. We don't need guests from these different perspectives fighting with each other. I just want a guy who believes in reality and says, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And, so I don't know if that helps anyone out there, but that's kind of where we're at.
There's quite a few sources that we mentioned, at least. But one of the things that is for all of us is we're using different sources for different things. So, like, if I want to know what's going on with Antifa, I go to Andy No.
Right.
If I want to know what's going on with COVID, I go to
who's this?
Alex
Berenson.
If I want to know it's
and if you want to know,
has become more pigeonholed.
If you want to go, if you want to know what's going on with Big Eva, then I'm gonna say one guy who's been consistently pretty accurate is Michael O'Fallon, Sovereign Nations. He's been right on. He's said things like a year, 2 years ago, even longer, and you see them play out before your eyes. So that's a guy that, and he has a lot to lose. So that's a guy that I tend to trust on, at least, when he says something accurate, something that's not vague and stuff, but he's like, this is going to happen, or this is happening, and this is the motive behind it. I listen to that. So, yeah.
There's an outlet I really like called the Gospel Collusion, and they seem to really just say things that really confirm my worldview. I like that.
Yeah, the Gospel Coalition just parrots whatever the MSM is saying, adding a veneer of gospel-ish language. Mm-hmm. So I might as well go to MSNBC if I want to know kind of like what that narrative is.
Straight from the horse's mouth.
Get the unadulterated narrative.
If you want a good nationalist perspective, I actually recommend the French Press. David
French, good nationalist. Yeah.
Good nationalist perspective.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's good. It's a longer episode. I appreciate you guys watching. And if you want to support what we're doing, which is documentary filmmaking right now, a really important story, getting it from the horse's mouth, telling it accurately. We believe in objective truth. You can go to the info section and click on the Give, Send, Go link, and we'll be really appreciative. So, God bless.